What is going on, everyone? It is Connor, the co-host with the most, back with another 2022 NHL Division preview. This time we're going to be looking at the Pacific Division. On the last episode, we looked at the Central Division, so this is the second episode previewing the Western Conference. We have the Pacific Division. So this video will be coming out on Wednesday. On the following Wednesday, we will start with the Eastern Conference, looking at the Atlantic Division. But for right now, we're going to be looking at the Western Conference and the Pacific Division. So let's get right into it. This conference produced the Edmonton Oilers as the Western Conference finalists last year. So let's get right into the rankings. So coming in at number 8, we're going to have the San Jose Sharks. Now, this is a team that's in full-on rebuild mode. They were 6th in the division last year, missed out on the playoffs. The last time they made the playoffs was the 2018-19 season. They lost to St. Louis in the conference finals. So that's 3 seasons in a row now they've missed the playoffs. And the last time they won a division crown was back in 2010-11 when they lost to Vancouver in the conference finals. That was the year that Vancouver lost to the Bruins in the Stanley Cup. So it's been a long time since the Sharks have really, had a huge amount of success. This is a team that for a long time was at the top of this division. They were a constant playoff contender. They were, a team that you expected to be there at the end of the season in the Western Conference Finals, but really been going through some hard times over the last 3 seasons, and now they're just kind of entering into a rebuild mode. So, that's why I have the Sharks here at number 8. They're not expected to do well. They're expected to just really kind of be at the bottom of the division here. So moving forward, just like in the previous episodes, I'm going to have one player on each team that I think was the biggest gain for them, one player that I think was the biggest loss, and then, of course, which player on the team has the best chance to win the Hart Trophy. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that these guys are going to be Hart Trophy contenders, but if I had to pick one player from each team that could be a Hart Trophy finalist, I'm going to pick them. So, which, for those who don't know, the Hart Trophy is the MVP trophy in the NHL. So the player that they brought in, their biggest addition, in my opinion, was Oscar Lindblom, a former Masterton winner. He has the great story, the player who had cancer, recovered from cancer to get back and play on the ice. He came over from the Flyers. He's definitely more of a kind of a third line forward. He's not really, a superstar or anything, but, he has an inspiring story, and he should make for a good depth piece for this Sharks team. Their biggest loss in the offseason is going to be Brian Burns. He got traded to the Carolina Hurricanes. Burns, he was a staple of this team for a long time, probably their best defensive player for a long, long time, a cornerstone of the franchise. But, this is the team, like I said, that's going into rebuild mode. So, Burns is now reaching, I think he's 37 now. So, he's reaching the tail end of his career. So they were able to trade him off to Carolina. They didn't really get too much in return for him. I was pretty surprised at how cheaply Carolina was able to get him. But, I guess the Sharks are just thinking let's just get rid of these contracts. Unfortunately for them, they are going to still have to pay around $3 million of his contract. The Hurricanes were able to work it out to where they only have to pay around $5.5 million of his $8.5 million contract. So, not necessarily a good move in terms of cap reasons for the Sharks, but, I know they want to get younger players on the team, so a good move there. Their Hart Trophy candidate for me is going to be Timo Meier. He's part of this, youth movement that the San Jose Sharks are going for. This is a team that for a long time featured the likes of Joe Thornton, Joe Pavelski, Patrick Marleau, some of the names of yesteryear in the NHL that were former, all-stars and great players. But Meier is, he's the leading scorer on this team now. He's 25 years old. He should be a great piece for them going forward. And he's currently their best player right now, in my opinion, given that, the struggles that Erik Karlsson's been having and the fact that Burns has left the team now. So Timo Meier, in my opinion, is their best Hart Trophy candidate, but this is a team that's going to be being in the bottom portion of the Western Conference, in my opinion. Moving on now to the Seattle Kraken, the NHL's newest franchise that came into existence last year. Of course, they've never been to the playoffs, and they've only been around for 1 season, and they missed the playoffs, so no playoffs or division crowns for them. They did finish at the bottom of the division last year. Definitely a lot of people thought it was a very interesting route that they took during the expansion draft. Vegas, when they did their expansion draft, really went for an all-in, win-now mentality, whereas Seattle definitely and a lot of experts' opinions didn't have the greatest expansion draft, but I think what they were really trying to do, they're trying to bring in young talent to build for the future. They're not really in win now mode, kind of like how the Golden Knights were back during their inaugural season. The Golden Knights have been a perennial playoff contender ever since they came in. The Kraken are definitely going for a bit of a different sort of approach here, building for the future to hopefully, compete for the playoffs in the future. So that being said, they did bring in a couple pieces during the offseason. They brought in Andre Burakovsky from the Colorado Avalanche, as well as bringing in Oliver Bjorkstrand from the Columbus Blue Jackets. So definitely, Burakovsky was a key piece on that Stanley Cup winning team for the Avalanche last year. Bjorkstrand definitely, adds some more depth to the team as well. Get that second or third line forward in there, just to pair with some of the other guys on this team like Jordan Eberle and Yanni Gourde. This is a team that, like I said, they're trying to build for the future. They had a lot of money to spend. They definitely went out and spent it during free agency. The big piece that they lose for me is Ryan Donato. Not a huge loss. He's was a bit more of a role player last year for them. So no real major losses for them here. But of course, it's hard to say that you lose a whole lot when your team comes in last place in the division. So you don't have too many stars on the team. I mean, really, outside of Jordan Eberle and Yanni Gourde, not a whole lot to write home about last year for the Seattle Kraken. But if I had to pick a Hart Trophy candidate, it is going to be Andre Burakovsky. He's going to be the new leader on this team. Eberle, he'll still be very good as well. He was the All-Star for them last year. Each team gets one All-Star representative every season. But Burakovsky, I think, has the best chance to be the Hart Trophy candidate for them in my mind. Coming off of that Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche, and he's got that championship pedigree now. So it's definitely he's going to bring a winning culture to this team, and he's definitely going to want to make an impression. And I know the Kraken are really hoping that he's going to be a good long-term piece for them as well. So moving on to the number 6 team here, we have the Anaheim Ducks. Sorry, my face is itchy. The Anaheim Ducks, they were 7th in the division last year, only 1 point behind the San Jose Sharks. Their last playoff appearance came in the 2017-18 season. They lost in the first round to San Jose. So, again, another team that's missed the playoffs quite a bit consecutively, 4 straight seasons that they've missed the playoffs. Their last division crown came a year before their last playoff appearance, but they lost in the conference finals to the Nashville Predators, who went on to lose the Stanley Cup to the Pittsburgh Penguins that year. The Anaheim Ducks here, another team that's really been struggling for a long time. They've had a lot of good young pieces on their team with the likes of Troy Terry and Trevor Zegras. I know for a lot of people, Zegras is one of the most exciting young players in the league. With his lacrosse-style goals and everything like that, he, had a good showing at the All-Star game and the skills competition. So a lot to like here in young pieces for the Anaheim Ducks, but they're a team that's not really in a position quite yet to really compete. Especially in the Western Conference, it's just there's better teams ahead of them. This is a team that I could definitely see making the playoffs a couple of years from now, but this year they're still going to come up short, in my opinion. Their big offseason addition was Ryan Strome coming over from the New York Rangers. He's another one of these players that he brings a lot of veteran leadership to this team. When you have a team of young players, it's good to have veteran leadership on the team. Strome, he's coming off a conference finals appearance with the Rangers. A key piece on their team as well, an alternate captain. So definitely going to bring a lot of experience and veteran leadership to this team. But that being said, you bring in one veteran and you lose another. Of course, the big loss for this team during the offseason, no question here, Ryan Getzlaf, the longtime Anaheim Duck, longtime captain of the Anaheim Ducks. He's their all-time career leader in points, their all-time career leader I believe he's their career leader in goals as well. I don't know if he's the leader in assists, but he is the Anaheim Ducks all-time leader in points. Definitely devastating for this team to lose him. You lose that veteran presence, you lose that veteran leadership. Definitely hard for them to lose him. Moving on to their Hart Trophy candidate, it's going to be, for me, it's definitely a choice between Troy Terry and Trevor Zegras, but I'm going to go ahead and take Troy Terry. I think he's probably the safer, better option here. Zegras, I definitely think, could be up there as well, but Terry really emerged last year as well and had a real breakout season. I think it kind of got lost behind all the hype that was going around Trevor Zegras, but Troy Terry, in my mind, is the best player on this team right now, and he's going to be the one that's going to lead this team into the future, along with Zegras, but Terry's going to be the one leading the way this season for sure, in my opinion. All right, so moving on to the number 5 team in the division now is going to be the Vancouver Canucks. This is kind of getting into the same territory as the Central Division, where we're going to start getting to a group of teams, not quite yet with the Canucks, but definitely the 3 teams after the Canucks were definitely very hard to very hard to place and very hard to rank. But with the Canucks, their last playoff season came 3 seasons ago in the 2019-2020 season. They lost in the second round to Vegas. They've only made the playoffs 3 times in the last 10 seasons, which is definitely surprising given that this was a franchise, back with the days of Marcus Naslund and the Sedin twins and Alexander Burrows. This is a team that was regularly making the playoffs, that was regularly, competing for the division crown. Their last one coming in 2012-2013. They lost in the first round to San Jose that year. So definitely it's been a long rebuild going on in Vancouver for the most part here. They've had a lot of young pieces come in. They've had retirements happen. And the Canucks are they're right on the edge here of trying to get back to the playoffs. They have a shot this year for sure to sneak in as one of those wild cards. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they do. They didn't make too many moves during the offseason. Their big addition was, it's going to be difficult for me to say this, Ilya Mikheyev. I hope I pronounced that right. Probably not. I probably butchered it. But he's coming over from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Definitely an underrated signing, in my opinion. A lot of people kind of see him as just more of a depth piece, like a third line forward. But I definitely think he could do some real damage for this team. I think his skill set plays really well with the team and the players around him. So I think it's going to be definitely an underrated signing for them. They did lose Alex, another last name I'm going to butcher, Alex Chason, I believe is how you pronounce it. They lost Alex Chason in the offseason. It's like you're kind of swapping one depth piece for another. But I think Mikheyev is going to be an upgrade for them for sure. Their most likely Hart Trophy candidate for me, definitely an interesting choice here, is going to be goalie Thatcher Demko. You don't normally see goalies being in the conversation for the Hart Trophy, but, Igor Shesterkin was in the conversation this year, so anything's possible. Demko, he's one of the best goalies in the league right now. He's really been, a key piece in the resurgence of this Canucks team. I think he's going to be a key piece. If they get in the playoffs, then he's going to be at the forefront of it. He was an all-star last year, and really just, it's definitely a key piece of your team to have a great goaltender, and the Canucks definitely have that problem solved. I know that was the problem with the Hurricanes for the longest time, was we didn't have a goalie. Or a consistent goalie, but the Vancouver Canucks definitely don't have that problem. Thatcher Demko is one of the best goalies in the league right now, and in my opinion, he's the best player on this team. So moving ahead now, like I said, these next 3 teams were really tough to rank for me in any particular order, but at number 4 here, we're going to have the Los Angeles Kings. They made the playoffs last year. They lost to Edmonton in the first round. Key stat for the LA Kings is that since their last Stanley Cup win in 2014, they have not made it past the first round in the playoffs. So definitely a bit of a interesting situation going on with the Kings. It's like, they make the playoffs quite often, but they never make any deep runs. Another interesting stat for them, the last time they won a division crown, they've won 2 Stanley Cups since 2010. They won in 2012 and 2014. They have not won a division crown since 1991, and lost in the second round to Edmonton that year. So a long time since for a division crown, but like I said, they've got 2 Stanley Cups to their name in this new, between 2010 and 2020. So, but they haven't made it past the first round since then. So definitely some things for them to think about. They did do they took Edmonton to 7 games this time around. I actually thought that they were going to win that series. I thought they were playing better, but Edmonton just was able to outdo them in the end. So moving on to their addition and subtraction, their biggest addition was going to be Kevin Fiala from the Minnesota Wild. I talked about him on the episode last week during the Central Division, about him being the big loss for the Minnesota Wild. Well, the Wild's loss is the Kings' gain. This guy's an 80-point scorer. He's, a potential all-star for this team. he's definitely, they need to bring in more scoring depth for this team, and he's definitely someone that can provide that for them. I've also got him listed as the Hart Trophy candidate. They've got some good players on this team. Drew Doughty is a really good player. Anze Kopitar is still very good, but I think Kevin Fiala, in my mind, has the best chance to win the Hart Trophy on this team. I think he's going to bring some much-needed goal scoring and some much-needed, energy to this team. So Kevin Fiala is going to be the one for me. Their biggest loss, kind of similar to the Anaheim Ducks, losing a long-time player, a long-time veteran, and that's going to be Dustin Brown. He announced before the playoffs last year that this was going to be his last ride, his last playoff run with the team. So again, just like with Getzlaf with Anaheim, it's tough to lose a long-time franchise staple like this, but it was definitely time for Dustin Brown to retire. He was definitely nowhere close to the player that he was during those Stanley Cup runs when he captained this team to both Stanley Cups. He even got stripped of his captaincy at one point, but was able to, regain, and he was an alternate captain when he retired. So a big loss for this team, but it's not going to be as crucial for them. I definitely think the addition of Kevin Fiala will lead this team back to the playoffs. And I could definitely see them making it past the first round for the first time in a long time, but I don't know if I can see this team quite yet making a deep playoff run. Moving on to the number 3 team, we're going to have the Calgary Flames here. Definitely the team that had the most chaotic, most storied offseason of anyone in the NHL. Obviously, they won the division last year and lost to Edmonton in the second round. There was a lot of people that were thinking that this team was going to make it to the Stanley Cup. They were thinking, if there's anyone in the West that's going to challenge the Avalanche, it's going to be the Flames. And, they really flamed out against the Edmonton Oilers, pun intended there. They really just didn't play well. It seems like they had forgotten their offense in the playoffs. Despite scoring on Mike Smith from their own zone at one point, it's just they couldn't keep up with the high-powered attack of the Edmonton Oilers. Jacob Markstrom really struggled during that series as well. So the Flames really bowed out in unceremonious fashion, especially after that thrilling 7-game series against Dallas in the first round. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do this season for sure. So talking about those off-season additions and subtractions. So obviously they lose Johnny Gaudreau, they lose Matthew Tkachuk, their 2 top point scorers, 2 of the biggest stars on this team that really helped lead them to the division crown. Both American-born players that wanted to go back and play in America. It's a trend that we're seeing a bit more often now that these American players that are playing for these Canadian teams don't want to play in Canada. They want to play back in America, back in the United States, closer to their home. So definitely, and I know that's getting a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs fans worried about what happens when Austin Matthews' contract is up. But, we're not talking about the Maple Leafs right now. That's for next week. But yeah, huge losses losing Gaudreau and losing Matthew Tkachuk. But in order to replace them, they brought in Jonathan Huberdeau from the Florida Panthers. He was the top point getter for the Panthers last year. The Panthers had the number 1 offense in the NHL last year. My only concern with Huberdeau is just his age. He's starting to get up there in age. Obviously, he didn't show any signs of slowing down last year. He had some ridiculous number of assists. I can't remember how much it was, but it was some ridiculous number. It was like in the 80s. It was pretty ridiculous. But he is going to be turning 30 soon, so he's getting a little bit older. Obviously, he's still near the prime of his career, but he's getting towards the tail end of the prime of his career, so I'm sure he'll be able to keep up the same productivity. But it's going to be interesting to see how he does fitting into a new environment. Also, they brought in Nazem Kadri, the long-awaited sweepstakes of who was going to sign Nazem Kadri. The Flames were the one that did it. And in my opinion, it's like, obviously you're bringing, you lose 2 All-Stars, you bring in an All-Star and a potential All-Star, and in my opinion, I just think the Flames lost more than they gained. If I had to pick between the combo of Gaudreau and Tkachuk and Huberdeau and Kadri, I'd go with Gaudreau and Tkachuk. I think they're the better duo here. I think they're the more talented duo. And so there's just a lot of uncertainty with this team, which is why I've got them in 3rd. I don't see them competing for the division at all. I could see them finishing as high as 2nd, but it's, there's a lot of turmoil going on here, so I don't know how well they're going to do per se. For their Hart Trophy candidate, I could have gone with Huberdeau, but I'm going to go with Elias Lindholm. He's been with the Flames for a while now. He was centering that line that Tkachuk and Gaudreau were on. He's their third leading point scorer last year, former Carolina Hurricane. I'm going to go with Elias Lindholm mainly because Huberdeau is definitely more of a passer than he is a scorer. Whereas Tkachuk and Gaudreau were doing the scoring and, Lindholm was setting them up. Huberdeau is definitely more of a playmaker than a sniper. So Lindholm kind of is too, but I think he'll be able to get some good setups and some good stuff from Jonathan Huberdeau, which will lead to Elias Lindholm being the most likely candidate for the Hart Trophy for the Flames. So moving on to the second place team here, we're going to have the Vegas Golden Knights. They were fourth in the division last year. It was the first time that they missed the playoffs in their franchise's history. They'd made it every season since their expansion draft in 2017. And they did make it the year previous. They lost to the semifinals to Montreal, who eventually went on to lose the Stanley Cup to the Tampa Bay Lightning. They won the division in 2019-2020, but they lost in the conference finals to the Dallas Stars in the bubble, who then went on to lose to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Stanley Cup final. But yeah, the Vegas Golden Knights, definitely a bit of an anomaly not seeing them in the playoffs. They had been a playoff staple ever since entering the league. I'm expecting a return to form for them here. It's definitely going to be close, and it's going to be tough for them to do that, but, we'll definitely see how they do. It's going to be interesting. The Golden Knights they went through a bit of turmoil during the offseason. They've had cap problems. Those veterans and those big contracts that they picked up during the expansion draft that made them so good at the start, it's definitely coming back to haunt them now. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they do. Their big offseason addition wasn't actually a player. It's going to be the head coaching position for Bruce Cassidy, who left Boston and is now going to be here in Vegas. He brings a winning culture. He led Boston to the playoffs for a lot of seasons while he was there. Definitely going to be interesting to see how he does in the head coaching role here. I think he can get them back to the playoffs. Their big loss was going to be Max Pacioretty. They lost another player, another Pacific Division team that lost a player to the Carolina Hurricanes. And in this situation, it was really just a cap dump. He's a 20-goal scorer. He's, a really good scorer when he's healthy. He's definitely had some injury problems, which, he has an injury problem right now. He tore his Achilles, so definitely an interesting move for them there. Like I said, it was just a cap dump. They weren't able to get anything in return. They only got future considerations in return, so definitely hurts to lose him, but their Hart Trophy candidate for me is going to be Jonathan Marchessault. He was the leading point scorer on this team. This team has a lot of good players still in Mark Stone and William Karlsson. And on the back end, they've got Alex Pietrangelo as well. But I think Marchessault is going to be the one that's going to compete for the Hart Trophy this year, potentially. He's, the leading goal scorer, the leading point getter on this team, and I think he's got the best shot. Finally, moving on to the number one team. If you've been paying attention, you should know the Edmonton Oilers here. Obviously, they made it to the conference finals last year, and they ended up losing to the Colorado Avalanche. Interesting stat about them is that after their appearance in the Stanley Cup final against the Carolina Hurricanes, they had missed the playoffs for 10 straight seasons after that. So, they definitely went through a really, really bad patch. But, with the additions of the likes of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, the Oilers are now a perennial playoff candidate. Their last division crown came back in the 1980s and 1986-87, back in the days of Wayne Gretzky. They won the Stanley Cup that year, by the way. But the Edmonton Oilers, I think there's no question in anyone's minds that they're the best team in this division. The Flames just have way too much uncertainty with them. Same with the Golden Knights as well, and the Kings are a bit of an unknown. So I don't think there's any question that the Edmonton Oilers are the best team in this division right now. Their big addition during the offseason is Jack Campbell, the goaltender from Toronto. That was definitely their biggest problem during the playoffs, was the goaltending. The Kings scored a lot of goals on them. The Flames scored a lot of goals on them. I mean, I mentioned in the thing with the Flames that Mike Smith actually ended up, there was a Flames player that was in their own zone, and he shot it all the way down the ice, and Mike Smith let the goal in. And it was just like the most bizarre goal I've ever seen, from how far away it was. So Campbell, he did suffer some struggles towards the tail end of the season and late into the playoffs, but Campbell's an all-star. He should definitely be an upgrade over Mike Smith, and that's what this team desperately needs as a goaltender, so that was huge for them. They did lose Duncan Keith on the back end, the longtime Chicago Blackhawk who finished his career with the Edmonton Oilers. He announced his retirement. Just more losing veteran leadership and veteran depth, nothing too major there, for sure, losing him. And then, of course, they're a perennial Hart Trophy candidate, no question. Connor McDavid, a lot of people consider him to be the best player in the league right now. Leon Draisaitl could also be here as well. He's, one of the best players in the league as well, but, it's hard to bet against Connor McDavid. It's hard to bet against him. I'm not sure there's much else to say about him other than, like I said, a lot of people think he's the best player in the league. I don't know if I would necessarily consider him the best. He's definitely top 5. And he, like I said, he's a perennial Hart Trophy candidate as well. If I had to explain why I don't think he's the best, I don't think his defense is up to par with some of these other top players, but he's definitely top 5. So, not saying he's not good or anything. He's top 5, but I don't know if I would consider him necessarily the best player in the league. But he's no-brainer of the Hart Trophy candidate for this team. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you let me know down in the comments below whether you agree with my takes, disagree with my takes. I'm sure someone's going to disagree with my take on Connor McDavid not being the best player in the league, but, let me know down in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you liked it. Leave a like if you liked the video. Make sure you check out all of our future videos. Like I said, I've got these coming out every Wednesday until the NHL season starts. We've got our podcast coming out every Tuesday. We've got Lockboard episodes coming out every Friday. So still a lot of content coming out for you guys. And until then, I will see you guys next time.